basic of like, yeah, hold these two. Like, I don't know. It's tough.
I mean, you do a good job of it, though. I would say, like, that's one thing this year I'm really proud of, I guess, or thankful for. Like, I think all of the casting, in my opinion, has been really good. I can say that some of the desk, there could be some more consistency, but I think in the casting, I've been very pleased with all of you guys and your experience together and duo-ness and all of that. I'm getting little beeps in my ear. There's this. I know we're live. Oh, those beeps went live? Oh, great. Oh. Well, welcome to the show, guys. I'm Kingdom, and I got IKON on the show as per usual. And my dude Chance came through today. Chance came through to check us out. So we're going to start a little bit different. We normally do a first five, but our first five is going to feature Chance specifically. So, but before I get into the first five, I'm going to rattle off some questions for you, Chance. And I want you to... I want you to answer them with the best efficiency that you can. They're not going to be like, if you're smoking B flag, how do you... No, it's not going to be questions like that. Right. But it's going to be some questions that nobody's aware of, actually, because I wrote them myself. But before I get to that, kind of want you to just introduce yourself. Where are you from? Where are you at? And what are you doing in Call of Duty?
Chance, studio caster. I talk about the game a lot from Charlotte, North Carolina. Now I live in Minnesota. So that's the spiel. I'm not these. I always hated like the icebreakers, like in college, like freshman year, where you go around, say one interesting thing about yourself. Like, yeah, I got nothing, man. Like, I don't know.
Everything you just said is pretty interesting. What is that on your? Is that Pepsi? What are you drinking?
Dr. Pepper, but you know, it's not sponsored, so I don't want to ruin any. If anybody's got like game fuel, but just the Dr. Pepper.
Oh, let me cover up this yellow bottle.
Yeah. My soda addiction knows no bounds.
All right, IKON, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, I guess I'll just kind of follow suit with Chance here. I don't know. I don't want to get too long-winded. But essentially, I just post map reviews on YouTube. So I'll just take a scrim, I'll record it, I'll have a little map up on screen, and then I'll just analyze what I'm seeing happening. I'll pause the video, kind of just show what's happening, why teams are doing what they're doing, and that's what I do. So IKONation on YouTube.
Molly in the chat says you're Chance the rapper. So
that's what my wife asked today.
What?
My wife asked, she goes, I said, I'm going to be on the podcast with Kingdom and Chance. And she goes, Chance the rapper?
Like, I mean, we're that big, you know. I turned him down when he asked if he wanted to be on the show, you know. So I got the next best thing. No, I'm just joking. All right. So are you ready for this, Chance?
Sure. I guess. Why not? Let's do it.
All right. Question number 1. Name your 4 top teams in the Call of Duty League.
Atlanta, Chicago, Dallas. After that, does it really matter? That's how I feel.
Give me a 4th.
I mean, so this is like the defense sitter in me wants that you could just pick like 8 different teams. I'd say at the next event, just Paris. Actually, no, Royal Ravens. I'll go London. Okay. I'll be confident with that. Ravens will be my 4th.
All right. So the top 3 are pretty obvious for most everyone. And then you've got London in 4th. I think that's a hard position to pick. All right. Next question. You have grown a lot more hair on your face this year. What's that about?
Genuine laziness of like, I got tired of shaving it all the time and like every day or once every few days. So I let it grow out purely out of laziness. That's all it is.
You still have to trim it up and everything, right?
Yeah, but now instead of like shaving it down to the brim and using an actual razor, I just have a trimmer and it takes like a minute or 2 minutes.
Oh, awesome.
Just pure and utter laziness is the facial hair.
Okay, good to know. All right, next question. Does pineapple belong on pizza?
I am an American. I believe in freedom. You could do whatever you want to your pizza. I will not put pineapple on mine because that's disgusting. But people can live however they want to live their lives.
I like it.
But I wouldn't date someone that did.
Oh, okay. All right. All the single ladies in the chat, take note. Don't put pineapple on your pizza if you want to date Chance. All right. 4th question. If eUnited as a roster was together in this game, where would you rate them in the CDL? Where would they place?
Well, I mean, the problem is you'd be taking good players from other teams. Like,
no, I know. So think about the other teams still somehow being who they are. So
like, does Simp get replicated? Is Simp on
Simp and
Atlanta?
and yes. Where would they place?
They would definitely be top 3. They would be better than Dallas.
Wow.
Atlanta still might be better than them, but I think they'd beat Chicago. If that answers questions, because like the Simpson and Beasley obviously take each other out. Then you got like RC is going to do pretty well. Clay's pretty good in this game to match up against like the Atlanta team. And then who would like the fifth be? Major Maniac versus Pristini? I don't know. I guess it is a sub-heavy meta. That's a good question. I'm very high on Atlanta. I'm not quite as confident in Chicago, so I'll say definitively there would be top 3. I won't give them the number 1 seed, but they might be able to beat Chicago. So I'll say a reprehensive second place, if that makes sense.
That's a good way of seeing it, of who you said they would beat almost guaranteed. There's something about spreading out the talent the way that team was able to do it last year that I think would work well in this game, in my opinion. I think Chicago is the most reflective roster of kind of having a diverse array of talent do well together. Atlanta's just a whole bunch of really good young guys, and they just fry. Major Maniac's 44, but
the oldest man in the league. Yeah, old man Maniac. But I mean, any team automatically with Simpson and Beasley on it, as long as they have like halfway decent ARs, they're going to be like a top 4 team in the game in my mind. And then Clay looks really good in this game. RC is obviously going to be disgusting at this game. So that bumps them up higher than like the top 4 slot for me. I just don't know. Like we've only seen the Atlanta team play twice. And in my mind, that could be a horrifyingly scary team to like play against across all game modes. So that's why I can't give them the number 1 spot. But the United team would be insanely good at this game. It would.
So are you saying, I'm just going to ask for clarification, if we replace 2 players on the Gorillas with Simp and Abizi, they'd be a top 4 team?
If you had, so I mean, you need at least halfway decent men ARs. I don't know if I have faith in like the Gorillas as a team to like be that squad, but they would definitely get better. Like that would probably be a team that could crack the top 4, but I wouldn't put a ton of money on it, at least not consistent.
Okay. All right. And then final question. Does Scump have 27 or 28 championships after last weekend?
Don't care. Genuinely don't care. Like, I think the argument about all the past trips is like absurd because all the old tournaments in the past used to be weird and not all the top teams would go there and there'd be weird pickup teams. Absolutely. So anytime someone says 33 championships, I read it if it's on a graphic, but it means nothing to me. That number doesn't affect anything on my mind on where I rank the players on like the all-time list. I will say in terms of a chip, the CDL event last weekend does not count as a full chip in my mind because Atlanta is a top 2 team. They were not there. If you don't beat the best, how can you count that as like a championship win? I think by the end of the year, we'll be able to make like a rating system of when all these top teams actually show up to whatever homestand event it is. Those count as a full chip. Some will be a half, some 90% or something like strange like that. But if Atlanta was not at the event, that is not a full chip win in my mind. If Chicago is not at an event, it's not a full chip win in my mind. But they get a CDL win. I think it's just a new era. We'll just call these CDL wins versus tournaments of the past.
So then is Crim6 pretty much permanently the winningest player of the previous era?
Sure. And then now we have like a new thing to tally in. And I think generally these new tournaments will hold not more weight than a normal chip, but will be more important than some of like the older tournament wins. Because I don't know how many of Crim's like chips will like, not that they're like invalid, but aren't worth as much as what like an MLG event of the past 4 years would be because the competition's been getting better and better. So I think wins now are more impressive because of how good the competition is, but the win isn't quite a full one if not all the competition is there. I don't know. It's going to be fuzzy and people could argue about it for like days. I just, it's tricky. That's all I got. It's Kingdom frozen. I was gonna say, dude, he was looking real intent on his screen. I was looking for feedback. Like, I know I'm not giving like a dead answer question. That is just a very intent look on his screen.
Wow, look at that.
I mean, just to continue though, I just think it's like a fun thing. It's just something extra to talk about. Is all it is in my mind.
I will say I'll pick up on that. I like that response just because the last podcast we did, I was the only one that said that. I don't really feel like you can take those as true championships. So like for me, I compared it to just traditional sports because that's kind of like, I don't know, that's just kind of how I look at things. So like I live in Cleveland, but if the Cavs won the East, I don't call that a championship. even though they won like that division, but without half the teams there, you know, like in the Eastern Conference playoffs. That's just how I looked at it. So if Atlanta's not there, and then all those other teams, so like Minnesota wasn't there, Florida wasn't there. If those guys aren't there, I mean, those guys could be 5, 6, 7 in power rankings, you know, however you want to look at it. So if those guys weren't there, I don't know. I don't really count it as a championship either.
Yeah, I mean, like at the end of the year when we have champs, it's either only 6 or 8 teams are going, which is different than like the 32 we would used to have. But in my mind, if you only have 8 teams that are there and they are the top 8 teams, like they've earned it and proved it throughout the year, that obviously counts as like a world championship win at that point because you're only lopping off the teams that are at the very bottom. But I think most of these homestand tournaments, one of the top 4 or top 6 or top 8 teams, if not multiple, are not going to be at these events. So it's just not the same. But I think this is something they talked about in the Hardpoint podcast. If you were to make a graphic and put it on like a CDL event, all you do is say tournament wins, CDL tournament wins, and you just separate the classification. And you just count from there. And then everyone kind of has their own internal adjustment of like what that means to them.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the only distinction there is that once we finally do get to champs, then it's like the 6 or 8 teams that are the absolute best. So obviously that's like, you know, that's a different scenario there. But as we go ahead and we get into our topics today, the first one that we have is if we're talking about, so obviously if you were to take a poll, maybe Dallas would be up there also. But if you were to take a poll, I think it'd be pretty safe to say that Chicago and Atlanta are the 2 like fan favorite teams. So as you go into this, who do you think people are going to root for the most?
Well, I don't know. I think Dallas might be, well, maybe like fan enemy or like the anti-favorite or villain or whatever.
They play that villain role, yeah.
This is something we talked about. So Chicago will have this conversation at every event that they go to.
Yeah.
We see him.
Can you hear me?
He's moving now. He's back. We're good. Welcome back.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Oh, man. That wasn't fun. I don't even know, like, what the heck happened. My computer got mad at me for some reason and just decided, you know, you're not going to be on the show anymore, buddy.
Chance, let me pick up on that thought that you were talking about real quick, just because I feel like what I expect to see is exactly what we saw in London, where like that home crowd will root for their home team. And as soon as they're out or if they're not playing, it's going to be Chicago. That's just kind of how I feel. Is that kind of what you were getting at in a way?
Yeah, so I think there's 2 extremes. I think the London team will cheer for their home team first, and then when Chicago has success, then they'll happily flip over to Chicago after that, but they want their team to win. Right. I think there's going to be a city like when the LA Gorillas play in LA, if they play against Chicago, I'm fully expecting everyone to cheer for Chicago and everyone to turn on their own team, and I don't think they'll have that like base. But I think every other city kind of falls in between. Like the Minnesota did a very good job of cheering for their own team. They got into it. They had guys dressing up like Vikings and like going the whole 9 yards, and it was great. I don't know how much of that would have stuck when they played against Chicago, but every city is going to have a different level of that. And I think Atlanta, just because the Faze guys are actually there, like not the Atlanta Faze pro team, but the actual Faze clan or whatever, I think enough of them are in Atlanta that I think the crowd will be on their side. I think it'll be they'll just cheer for both at the same time. Like they'll root for Atlanta a little bit, and then if Chicago has success, they'll just turn. In my mind.
You're okay. So you guys are talking about who they're going to root for.
Yep.
And did I hear you basically say you think they'll root for the home team except for when they play against Chicago? If Chicago's winning, you said they'll turn on.
Right. That's when I think they'll turn. I think the Atlanta crowd will mostly, obviously different people are going to cheer for different things, but will mostly root for the Atlanta team to win against Chicago. But then if they're watching T2P go off, they're going to cheer just as loud anyway. Like I think that would be most people's preference, would be my guess for Atlanta. But I think most other cities, it'll be almost like holistically Chicago. Like the same thing for Dallas. It'll be in that crowd. They're going to ignore their team, I think, and cheer for the Chicago team. I would guess.
You know what you just made me think about is, so I feel like that's going to happen at most events, but traditionally, now I know that, you know, different events have been different as we went through them, but that Anaheim event, so when you get those events out in LA, those are like real, those traditionally have been real optic heavy. I wonder if that crowd, so when they have the LA event, I wonder if that'll be like a big LA crowd, or if they're going to end up rooting for Chicago just because of that old optic vibe that they have there.
Well, that's what I think. Enough people that have gone to those events, if they repeat, they're going to cheer for the Optic guys because like that's what they're used to. I think like the Minnesota is a good example of they haven't gotten anywhere near an esport event in such a long time. That was probably almost every single person in that venue's first event they've been to. So you want to cheer for your home team because you have that like new attachment. But I just think like Atlanta's a place where we've had an event in the past, so it'll be a little bit murkier. Seattle, we've had an event in the past, it'll be a little bit new. Chicago would have been a good trial run since we haven't had an event there, but obviously they're going to cheer for Chicago anyway. So maybe like New York would be an interesting one. We haven't had an event up there, but I just think there's like 2 teams or maybe 3, including the Ravens, that could compete with the Chicago fan base. And that's basically just like Atlanta. Dallas, I think even will be like Chicago heavy. I don't know. Chicago's going to be the favorite everywhere, man. We'll see though. That's the fun of it, I suppose.
Dallas is going to be, I really wish, there's a part of me that wishes that, so FaZe got to keep their brand. Optic kept their brand. I mean,
sort of.
Or shell of a brand, whatever anybody wants to call it. But I wish Envy would have been able to keep their brand in this league and would have been like the Envy Empire or whatever they want to, Dallas Envy or something, because I feel like that would have done a lot more for that organization, because now you're rebuilding an entire brand, but you have one of the most, there's 3 storied brands in Call of Duty, period, you know, and FaZe, Optic, and Envy, and they've all lasted the test of time, whether it's competitive or what they do on YouTube and things like that with other esports. And, you know, Hastro's always been able to expand into other esports and really build something big for his brand. And I understand they got the Dallas, you know, fuel and all that, but I almost wish the Dallas Envy would have been a team. I think when they going into their homestead, it would have been a lot easier to promote them over, but it's been so easy to transfer the Optic fan base over to the Huntsmen. It's been like it was, I mean, I didn't think it was going to take a long time, but literally it was almost like instantaneous. The moment Hector and Seth announced where they were going and what they were doing, it was like, okay, let's go over there. And then I think T2P helped that a lot. You know, when you're able to say, yeah, we have Formal as well. If it would have been a whole new organization with just Scump and a whole bunch of other people, maybe it would have been different. But I think T2P and Formal is back in formal form, whether it's what he tweets, what he says on stream, or, you know, what he's saying in interviews. I mean, he's back in full form. And so I'm excited for us to get to the point where we talk a little bit about what's going to happen this upcoming weekend, because I think Chicago has an opportunity to solidify. We're going to be winning all year. You guys drastically underestimated us, because there were people that were like, well, Dallas might beat you, you know? And there's people right now that really want to say FaZe is the best team, but they can't say it. It's like, you're like, but Chicago, I mean, I can't call it, even though with what I've seen on LAN and online, it looks like Atlanta should be the team to beat. But Chicago has kind of stepped up and proved, no, we're the team to beat. And so it's going to be interesting. So this is kind of a question, Chance, that maybe you can help with, and IKON probably as well, but Chance maybe more so. With this the observer issue that like Krim was tweeting about the other day, with the problems with not being, I know you're part of the CDL and you probably can't say anything, but what is the actual issue and what is its impact is what I want to know. Like, what impact is it having that players are saying we might not be able to play this weekend?
If I understand it correctly, there's 2 separate issues. One is just the observers for the CDL run on PCs. And apparently there's a crossplay glitch where when a PC hosts a lobby, one player from either Xbox or PS4 can join the lobby, but after that, it like soft locks out. So like one person can join, but then the lobby just becomes unjoinable for everyone. So if that doesn't get fixed, I think for one, everyone would now have to drive off of a PS4, which I don't know if they have the Zims to where they could use their same PC controls, but it might turn into the observers having to use controllers when I think all of them do use like keyboard and mouse now. I'm pretty sure. Maybe one guy doesn't. But of the 5 of them, at least 4 people would have to make the switch. That's one option. But then something Brian Zane was talking about, of even the normal lobbies don't work. And I think it's purely Codcaster. Like, I think all the lobbies can be set up and run, and like the players will be fine within them for the LAN capabilities. But I think something's weird about Codcaster with it. And that I'm not entirely sure on, but I know that there is a very real possibility of us having like some very weird solutions we might have to potentially bring in. But also it's worth mentioning that all the Codcaster stuff that that like what we have access to is not the same observer tools that the actual observers at events have. They have their own like special case or server or something like that with their own like, it's slightly unique compared to what we have at home. So I was asking Paradox about this, who's one of like the guys in the observer crew,
Right.
and he said they just haven't, as of yesterday, they hadn't tested it because it was Sunday and today's a holiday. So I don't know if they figured it out or if it's not a problem at all. I know it's potentially a massive issue of not being able to set up lobbies properly, but I know it's something being looked at. Hopefully they'll figure something out.
Well, and it sounds like, does that mean like, because currently our coaches in game when they're on LAN, our coaches like, are they in the, like, I know they're not talking to their players and everything, but are they in the game?
Well, this is why I haven't seen anyone give it, like it's Brian saying on Twitter that I've seen saying the normal lobbies don't work. I don't know if that just means they can only spectate their team or if they've only the mini map or if certain tools are broken. I just know he said it's messed up. Okay. I do know that the crossplay thing is actually a big issue because the observers we have are like obviously on PCs, but that has a potential easy workaround. It's just if the second part is an issue, that's where I don't know if it makes a difference just because the observers at events are using a slightly different codcaster than what we have access to on our like consoles or like home PCs.
Okay.
So it might be a non-issue. And then if it is an issue, I think there's a fix that doesn't require IW to make a patch, but I'm also not sure at all. I just know that everyone, like it's been run up the ladder and people are like trying to figure it out.
Well, yeah, I went and followed the trail on Reddit, which is a very, of course, upvoted comment. They posted a picture of what Krim had said, and a lot of people, most of the people in the comments were like, what is the real issue, like what's actually happening? Because people are asking if it has to do with the platypus thing that people have been tweeting out. It's really, why are you making that face?
The platypus thing? I have no idea what the platypus thing is. No,
the platypus error that people are getting in game.
The platypus? No. Oh, it's just like the error message that has like a weird.
And it says error platypus.
Okay, one of those.
Yeah. So, so it's. I guess there's a lot. It sounds like there's a lot of in-game issues. It's not CDL issues. It's not anything that nobody at the league has done. It's issues in game. And I guess Krim is saying it's to the point. And I'm like, well, why is Krim 6 talking about that this is bad enough to where they might have to cancel the tournament? Like, who's saying that? Like, is this something we're just not privy to? But nobody's been able to explain this issue well enough to me where I'm like, oh, okay, well, that actually makes sense that he would say that. But it seems to be getting a lot of attention. So I wanted to ask and see if you had any clarification on it.
No, I just know, it is an issue, I think, with the current state. It just might not apply to what our observers are actually going to use. So it might be a non-issue to begin with. And then even if it is an issue, I think there should be workarounds. It just might be unfortunate if the guys have to switch from PC hosting to PS4. So
because it'll be different. I mean, Paradox is the GOAT with a controller, right? I mean,
he will be, but also, I mean, again, it's the 5-man team. They have new tools. Because one of the guys is like a game director to pick whose feed. I don't know how complicated of a setup it is to switch from PC to PS4, but it's like 4 guys are running each their own individual perspective, and one guy's picking from that. So I'm not tech savvy enough to know how complicated of a switch it's going to be. I just know that, I'm expecting it to be fun. I'm not like too fearful, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, that would really suck if like somehow lobbies didn't work. Or I think worst case, it'll just more pressure on the observers to perform higher than usual with different constraints.
I think, I mean, I don't know because I don't know our observer team, but I know Paradox at least came from kind of when he was having to use a controller and he's ran series by himself back in the day. So I think the capabilities are there, and they'll step up and do their best. I just want to see some Call of Duty this weekend. So I mean, if I don't get to see third person, I'm not going to cry, or if it's, I'm not going to be sad about that. So, so I wanted to ask both of your guys' feedback on the whole changes that have been made. CDL announced that we're taking a minute off of each Dom side, I believe, and it's going to 5 minutes, and then S&D's 30 seconds off of each round. And I guess I'll start with you, IKON, because you observe games so much. What impact what impact do you see that this is going to have? Are they already scrimming with this? I'm guessing they are, with the new rules. And have you seen any changes in gameplay and results based on the changes?
All right. So if I just take a look at the two of them, I think one of them, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. So if we're looking at domination, I don't think taking a minute off of each side really matters all too much. Sure, it's a little bit shorter, but I feel like if you were to take the results and just lop a minute off of each side, the results would probably be pretty much the same. A lot of those dom matches really aren't all that close anyways. I think where this really comes into play is search and destroy, especially, and the biggest reason why. So if dead silence was a perk, I don't think this would be an issue. I think the longer rounds are a little bit better, but if it goes to 130, I think the charge time of dead silence is right around 130. So you could potentially have to make moves in search and destroy without dead silence pop, and I think that's the biggest thing. Domination, it's just a shorter game. There's nothing like strategy wise that really plays into that too much. It's not like, since there's 1 minute shorter, that's going to affect whether or not you're able to push out a flank. Like that doesn't correlate in my mind. But what does correlate is having to make moves in search and destroy rounds without the potential of having search and destroy charged yet.
So before you give your thoughts, Chance, I noticed in London and even in Minnesota, one of the things in Dom, which was one of the most difficult to follow game types, I noticed that last minute seemed to be important. It was kind of like whether it was the first half or the second half. For the second half, that last minute, that 6th minute, even in the Dallas versus Chicago series, that's where Chicago kind of took the game away. But in the first half, when you guys were casting, it seemed like you were saying how important it was to go into the second half with a certain type of lead. Do you think that shortening the time is going to change? Our team's going to have to change their strategies for that? And then also, if you could kind of speak to what impact you think the S&D changes are going to have.
No, it won't change any strategies. Like, the maps play the same no matter how long the rounds last. Maybe like as long as they're more than like 2 minutes or something like that. But right. IKON's pretty much right. For Dom, in my mind, it's just a positive change. 6 minutes is kind of weird. We've always had 5-minute rounds for Dom. I don't know why I'd like switch necessarily to begin with. And he also was correct in saying that, I'm making this number up, it's a Maven stat, but like 80% of the games are decided maybe 2 minutes before the game actually ends, or a minute. Like, the game just becomes mathematically impossible. So shortening the game by 20% or whatever the number is, it makes it that much closer to where now more games will be more impactful when that final minute hits, of you create more tense gameplay time. Like, you just eliminate more games where it's mathematically impossible. So for Dom, it's great. Doesn't change the strategy of the maps. Everything's the same, just a little bit quicker. And so hopefully a little bit more fun and exciting. And then for S&D, he's also right. It speeds the game up a ton. Like, that 30 seconds is a pretty substantial shift. 25% of the round just gets lopped off. Now, again, it used to be every round you could sit and wait for dead silence if you really wanted to make a play. Everyone would kind of like wait on offense, just play it like a little bit patient, draw things out a little bit more. That option is not afforded to you anymore. So the strategies actually, they don't necessarily have to change, but they do have to get sped up a lot. And it's also going to be a little bit map dependent as well. Like, Gunrunner will still probably play mostly the same, but like Arklaw, Peak, offensive teams are going to have to figure something out and like new strategies. It might turn into, if you don't have dead silence, you just throw up a couple smokes, you just rush up to the bomb and just hope things work out for you. Just because like you're not going to have time to like wait for dead silence to make like a cold calculated play, just because of how large the map is. It's also going to turn into whatever bomb site you pick at the start, you probably have to commit to on a lot of these maps. Because like, especially on Arklaw, it'll take you 30-35 seconds to get to B if you just sprint there, and now it takes you another 30 seconds to rotate it out, and that's assuming you're not like taking gunfights. So teams will have to be more decisive, you'll have to be a lot quicker, and you will have to adapt a lot as well.
I got just one other thing to add there, just to try to solidify this point, because I think I understand where you were going. A lot of what, and Chance, please tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like a lot of what casters are saying, like in that last minute, is really situational. So if you're, say a team's down by 30 entering the last minute of a round, now all of a sudden that last minute of that first round is really important, because now you could either be down by 42 or down by 18. So that's why like that last minute is really important, because, you know, are you going to be down by 18 or down by 42 or whatever? So now that situation is just pushed forward a little bit more. So it still all kind of exists the same way situationally. It's just, you know, the minutes are adjusted. That's how I feel.
Yeah, it's just like a scaled down effect. Now if what we were saying, it's again map dependent, but if a 30-point lead is where a team is comfortable going in the second half, where they say, hey,
Right.
we can take our time, we could play super passive and play for kills instead of placing heavy amount of importance on like the B flag because we don't need it, they do. So let's play for kills type deal. If a 30-point lead was where they were comfortable now it's like a 24-point lead that they'll be comfortable with because it's scaled down by whatever percent of like the game shortening. So you save yourself 2 minutes,
Yeah.
which a 2 flag cap is like the 24 points. It's just that much. It's just scaled down by whatever that percent is. So instead of 30-point, just a 24-point like lead, that type.
Would I be wrong to say that a team like Seattle is going to be adversely affected by speeding up the time in search, and a team maybe like Atlanta or recently what they've proven is even Chicago will benefit from speeding up search, or is it not that easy to translate?
I think, well, that's a very interesting question. I think most of it is just adaptability. Like for the Seattle, let's assume they didn't make the Pander switch because that'll have more of an impact than like the round timer. But it could very well be a situation for some of these teams if they're forced to make decisions instead of like if Seattle, instead of playing search and destroy, now you're playing team deathmatch. You don't have time to think, just go. That could have actually benefited them in some way. But I think for the most part, wherever teams were in search, it's still going to be the same because the game, like everyone has to make the same adjustments, and better search and destroy players will be able to adapt quicker. So like Atlanta, I think will still thrive in this environment. They'll thrive in the chaos of search. It just, because the most important thing is you're just going to be forced to make more plays in 2v2s or 3v3s, whatever they are, without dead silence. So whoever can manage being at like a slight disadvantage better are going to be the players and teams that have more success, which will be the teams that were having success to begin with.
It's interesting because I think the first blood percentage didn't matter for Seattle. They actually got a good number of first bloods, but they're the worst team at transferring that into winning a round. And at the same time, I think they're 1-7 in search. And so I'm wondering if it may even have a better impact for a team like that, where they get the first blood and now it's a little more chaotic. They just have to make the right decisions and quicker decisions, I would say, based on watching them play search. I mean, go ahead, Icon.
I was just going to say, I do think for search, there's a lot of strategy that's taken out of the game in that last 30 seconds too. Like think about, say it's a 3v3 and you're both on the same bomb site and you know that you don't have control of that bomb site. Now you don't have that extra 30 seconds to rotate to the other bomb site. So you're forced to kind of push through that 3v3 and hopefully you can get the kills, whereas most teams might back out of that, rotate to the other bomb site, and then set up that way. So I feel like it takes some of that ability away also.
It's going to be interesting. All right, so a couple more things to talk about before we get into predictions. We'll probably take a break before predictions, guys. But Contesting the Point, the new show that you were on, Chance. I actually... Like, this is going to be so horrible of me to say, but my first thought was, hey, where'd they find this other black dude and why is that not me? That's the first thing I thought when I saw
Malik.
the show.
It's Malik.
No, and he did great. But the one point where I was like, dang it, Malik should have spoke up was at the very end of it. You know, when you were going against Nameless on that last point, I kind of, the show, and Nameless tweeted about it, you tweeted about it as well, and you said your mentions are great and glorious, and Nameless was like, why are people, they're not understanding this show, and so my thing was like, the show it's good and it had a good idea, but I thought it was going to be more of like, because even when I watch like hardcore NBA debate shows, there's room for both people to speak and all that kind of stuff. And I know how analytical you can be. It's one of the things that I was so excited about when you started casting years ago. I was like, this guy is going to bring an analytical style to casting, and partnering with Benson, it kind of makes things perfect. But are there other shows coming out? And are you going to be featured on more of Contesting the Point? Are you going to get an opportunity to kind of take those golden Astros away from Nameless? And how did you think that went?
I will I mean, I can't predict the future. I should be on more episodes in the future. Actually, I'll definitely be on at least one more episode in the future. That I can't say for sure. But I don't know exactly how many I'll be on. I know it's just a rotation. A lot of it is just based on like convenience almost. Like for London, a lot of the guys are British casters. They just stayed in like the UK to like see family, so they couldn't be on the show. Because like every other week or every week we'll have an event, so it's more based on convenience for a lot of these guys of who can go where at like what time sort of thing. But should be on more episodes. I don't know exactly how many we'll have this year, but I'll get the Astros back. I also forgot what the other question was. The other part B.
How did you think the show went? Like, I mean, I know you didn't win, but I mean,
pretty good. I think the feedback was pretty good. I mean, it's the nature of the show, and Nameless does understand this, that when you're giving like the hot takes and just having the debate, especially if you're gifted like tasked the side that the community is not going to agree with the argument, they're going to give you crap for it. But that's the price you pay for like entertainment sort of thing. So I think it went well. I thought the feedback was pretty good. I thought Malik did a great job as well. I think this is the first thing he's done in like COD. I know he's done stuff in like a bunch of different games so far, but for it to be like his first thing, like dude was very professional. He knew his stuff. He had more notes than me and Nameless did coming into like the day to like prepare for it. So I was happy with it the whole way around. I thought it went well.
Yeah, his takes were actually good. It would have been nice if you guys could have kind of picked a side, but you know, I know that wasn't the nature of the show. And that I'm trying to remember what do you remember what the last argument was?
Den's top 5, I'm sure.
Yep.
Yes, that I wanted to cry when Nameless said he wasn't in top 5 of his team. I was like, what? I was like, Den's was in the top 3 for the whole tournament for overall KD, and out of the other 2 that were above him, which was Octane and I don't remember the other person, they didn't have over 1 KD in every game type. Den's was consistent in every game mode, and I was like, I thought he was the best player for his team. I actually DM'd him after the event and told him he was a GOAT, you know, and he was like, well, I wish we would have won. But I mean, I that point was where I kind of was like, oh, okay. I was like, so Nameless is going to win this by just kind of bullying. And he threw your notes on the ground, and I was like, oh, okay. I was like, I didn't know we were going there with it. But I thought overall the show was good. And I think the funny thing is, at the end of the day, I thought about it. I was like, as much attention as it's getting, and as much attention as Nameless is getting, more people are going to tune in. You know, it's just, there's really like, it's good publicity for you guys. And I thought it was a good show, and I didn't expect it. I saw people talking about it on my timeline, and I was like, what? Huh? What? There's a CDL show? I was like, I've been praying for one of these, man. And I went and watched, and then I was like, oh, this is awesome. You know, I was like, and Chance is on there. And for some reason, I watched all of Minnesota and London. But it wasn't until I watched that show that I noticed how much hair you had on your face. I don't know why that was, but it was on that show. I was like, maybe the makeup they put on, I don't know. It was kind of like, oh, okay.
Just a more direct, like one on camera shot, something like that.
Straight in your face, yeah. But it was good. You did a good job. Okay, so Crim versus Scump and Formal. The fun going on in the COD community right now. It has gotten very interesting. I did a whole video about it, and I kind of came to a point where I think it's beef and banter. I think it's both. I think they don't like each other, but at the same time, they're professionals that are getting paid to play a video game at the highest level, and one got second place at the last event and the other one got first. And, you know, it's kind of like, well, my team's doing a lot better than, you know, people are saying it is. But my question for you guys is kind of, if Chicago is beat by FaZe, and let's say handedly beat by FaZe, do you think we're going to hear about that from Crim? And do you think is it going to increase the rivalry between Chicago and Dallas, or is it going to kind of kill it, and then all the focus is going to be on Chicago and FaZe?
I mean, after you, IKON, by all means.
I'll just go real quick, because I think I don't have a ton to say on this, but I just feel like if Chicago ends up losing to Atlanta, I don't feel like somebody else from another team can kind of pick off of that. I don't feel like that would strengthen a rivalry, or I don't think Crim would be able to say anything based on that, just because I don't know, you didn't do that. So I feel like that would be a weird thing to kind of brag about. What I think it would do is I think it would really solidify Chicago and Dallas battling for that second spot. If Atlanta wins this event easily, I think that it's very clear that there's a 2 and a 3 there with Atlanta at 1. So it would maybe strengthen that rivalry in terms of who's battling for 2. But if I was Krim and Chicago loses, I don't know. I personally wouldn't be out there saying anything because I wasn't the one that defeated them.
Okay, Chance.
No, I agree. I don't think Krim would talk smack using someone else's success. That would be very like strange. I also don't think the rivalry will go anywhere. I think every time those two teams play, there's going to be smack talk across the aisle from either side. I don't see that fizzling out anytime. Like even if Chicago wins the next 8 in a row, if the one after that Dallas gets the win, I expect Dallas to be as fired up as possible. Like the rivalry is not going to change, but I do think, and this is something I think Merck has touched on quite a bit of like, Chicago's beaten them 3 times. I think fairly convincingly every single time, even though some maps have been close, you beat them 3 times, like a couple 3-0s, 3-1s, whatever it was.
They're the better team, yeah.
Clear-cut better team at the start of the year. And now it's clearly Faze that next top dog. Like that's like the marquee matchup. That's what I want to see. Chicago versus Faze. I think that's Chicago is very aware that like that's the next team to beat to like solidify yourself as the number 1. But it doesn't take away or like detract from the Dallas rivalry at all. That'll just be like it's just a separate thing. Like I don't think Faze impacts that rivalry in any capacity. It's just Faze just doesn't want to be part of it. They're like, I don't care about who hates each other. I just want to win.
Do you think that if Faze kind of proves that they're just a step above, is there even a team that's going to have a rivalry with Faze? Like, or are they just going to kind of be their own entity because all of their players are not new, but newer to the scene in terms of they don't have history with other players. Like Aches is going to have a rivalry with anybody he plays at this point, you know, and and if it was Aches, so I hear what you guys are saying about Krim, but if it was Aches, he would definitely tweet something if a team that was his rival lost to anybody else. It wouldn't, he wouldn't even think twice. And he would have a clever tweet loaded and saved in his drafts for after the event. But do you think that is Atlanta going to kind of be that team that just everybody's kind of chasing? And I know I don't want to get into our predictions yet, but if they win this event, I'll say, are they going to be that team that everybody's chasing and they're just not going to have rivals, and everybody's just going to be trying to beat them when they get on land? There's going to be that best team that everybody wants to beat.
I mean, I think at this point, there's no, I would be very surprised if we see another dynasty type like run again. Like even if like, let's say hypothetically either Faze or Chicago is the clear cut number 1 the entire year, I still think at best they only win 70 or like 80% of their matches, let's say. So winning 80% of your matches will mean you win 80% of your tournaments, whatever it is going to be. But there's too many good teams that'll end up taking series off of all of these different teams that, like, there's no way in my mind that Atlanta or Chicago will be firmly above the rest and will just dominate everyone the entire year. Like the competition's too good. Too many teams will catch them. Whether it'll be Chicago and Atlanta battling back and forth and then Dallas like nipping at their heels, that might be a little bit, the subliners might randomly, because like there's so many teams that even in scrims are doing incredibly well against Atlanta and Chicago. And when I say incredibly well, even coming close to splitting maps like 50-50. Yeah, right. Like doing enough that you could feasibly beat them on land. And it's just that on land, Chicago has the right formula, the right stuff going. If Atlanta has that as well, it's not going to last forever. They're not going to win every single series. It's just, there's too many good teams. The Ravens are going to start taking maps and series off of these guys. The subliners will kick up eventually. The Rocker might be like too many good teams. No more dynasties. That's
with those 2 teams that you're talking about, Dallas and Atlanta. Or not Dallas. I'm sorry, Chicago and Atlanta. My question is, who's going to be impacted more by losing? You know, and we don't know yet because Chicago hasn't lost and Atlanta hasn't lost. You know, and it's going to happen this weekend. One of the 2 of those teams is not winning this tournament. And so it's going to be interesting to see. I think Dallas has handled losing very well.
Yeah, agreed.
With everybody talking about Ilya and Shotzi and oh my gosh, the young guys got to get better and Clay and Krim are playing consistent. And these guys are like, yeah, well, we're going to reverse sweep the whole home team and get second place. You know, and so I think they've handled the losses that they've taken on the chin and kept it rolling and done as best as they could. I think Chicago's just kind of proved they're the better team right now. But I'm wondering how the almighty strength of what's happening and what's coming out of Chicago right now with all the talking they're doing about Chicago. And secretly, if everybody's paying attention, there's some murmurs about Atlanta being an online team that's coming out of the Chicago squad. And so I know. And so when I hear that on somebody's stream, I'm like, oh gosh. I was like, man, if an L comes on land, I'm interested to see how this team responds, because in the past, one of the big challenges with T2P has been we win, and once we start losing, we fall apart, and we unravel. And I don't think Atlanta is a team like that, especially with Crowder as their coach. But we'll see, because I agree with you. Dynasties are going to be near impossible. The only way a dynasty would happen in this game is if Atlanta beat Chicago and they actually did unravel, and then nobody could beat them, and Atlanta would just kind of float at the top, and people would be trying to get them for the rest of the season. But I think Enable's already talking about trades and changes and changing rosters and things like that. So it looks like we're maybe going to see some trades happen this year, if teams are already hitting him up and stuff like that. And so it's going to be interesting what changes take place. There's some others that I've heard about per sources, but it's going to be interesting to see what changes take place this year and how it impacts the potential of anybody doing a dynasty. The last thing I want to throw out there, it's not on the sheet, but it's something that I just have been learning about over the last day, and I don't know if you've seen it, Chance. The whole thing with Krim saying Chicago broke the gentleman's agreement, and they kind of have said, yeah, it was a mistake. But I saw something on Reddit that I didn't think about, okay, so if the mistake was we accidentally used 3 stuns and we're supposed to use 2 flashes, 2 stuns, and 1 smoke, we accidentally used 3 stuns for the entire Dallas series. My question would be, well, how is an accident possible if you basically do on land what you do online? If you prepare in scrims, you're carrying a stun, you're carrying a stun, you're carrying a flash, you're carrying a flash, you're carrying a smoke, and then accidentally there's 3 stuns instead of 2 flashes and 2 stuns. And the only question I have for you guys is, because Krim has kind of said, who cares, we lost the series. Like, he's kind of manned up. And if you watch the rest, if you soundbite it and watch like the DeSerto clip, then you might think like Krim is crying like everybody's saying. But if you watch the rest of what he said, he's just like, we lost the series fair and square. But people are like, well, do you think you would have won if he wouldn't have had, if they would have had 2 flashes and 2 stuns? And it's like, well, I mean, we only lost the hard point by 11 points. You never know. And so, but my question for you guys is there an impact in this game? Is there a difference between carrying 3 stuns and a flash versus 2 flashes and 2 stuns? Does it actually have an impact?
I'll go real quick. To me, it does, just because you can slow down the map, right? If essentially the biggest difference between a flash and a stun is that you're slowing down the progress of your enemy. So for me personally, if a team was running 3 instead of 2, I think the only possible advantage it could have is that you could really slow down the advancement of teams in those choke points. So outside of that, I'm not sure how much. I'm not sure how much of an impact it has. One thing that I will say is that to me personally, I wouldn't accuse anybody of, running 3 and 1 versus 2 and 2 and then knowing of it. I take their word. I don't know. I take it as it was just a mistake. But in terms of strategy, because that's really what I follow, I don't know these guys personal like you do. I'm just, I like to break down the maps. But that's what I see, is that you would, so like if you're playing Atlanta, for example, Atlanta is so fast. Their SMGs play so fast in respawn games that all of a sudden, if you have an extra stun, you can throw those into choke points. You can slow down their push, and then you can gain map control that way. So that's what I would see from a strategy point. But for me personally, I don't know. I'll just take it as a mistake and I'll just move on.
And it sounds like that's what Krim is doing. But I'm asking you guys the question: is there an actual impact? Like, Chance, you didn't look like you wanted to respond, even though you lowered your mic.
Well, no. There is. It's just, this is like a level of depth. I'm not going to pretend like I understand it about this game like yet. Gotcha. I'm not playing against the pro, so I don't know. If you follow the thread, I think they furthered a little bit. Krim, if I'm remembering correctly, effectively said that having the extra stun helped them on Azir Cave, like hardpoint, hurt them on St. Petro Dom, which I think goes to the idea of like the stun slow people down. it's in hard point, timings matter. If you have an extra stun to slow them down or whatever rotation, that could win you a hill that buys you an extra 30, 40 points or whatever it's going to be, versus St. Petro Dom, where you want to flash to take the guy out completely for 4 seconds of like the gunfight rather than just like slow them down. So he effectively said, I think it's a wash. It's not actually that big of a deal. And I think RCD's also made the point of, we were rushed like in the grand finals because we had to like switch sides of the stage that we were on and had to like make all of our classes as quickly as possible. We just didn't notice that one guy had the stun instead of the flash on whatever class. Like, I think it was an honest mistake. I don't think if it would be different if like Chicago and Dallas had been trading maps back and forth constantly. Chicago beat him twice. They beat him a third time. I don't think the stun made a difference.
It wasn't malicious.
And the difference that it's going to make, again, are to the point where pros are saying they're map dependent and incredibly specific. This is not something I would ever pick up on while casting. It would take me quite some time if I was like doing VOD review to figure this out as well. I just think it's a super fine detail that it's not that it's not worth bringing up, but it's so like minute that it's just, I don't know. It doesn't make a difference to me.
Should he, if that's the case, and it sounds like Krim is actually agreeing with what both of you were saying, like it's a minute detail and we lost the series fair and square, but especially with the fan base of the Huntsmen that now I saw Krim tweeted out that he was wearing shorts today and he was like, what should I go do? And people in the comments, of course, were like, well, whatever you do, don't go cry about, them carrying an extra stun. With that fan base, is this one of those moments where maybe he should have just talked about it to them on the side, which I'm sure happened in the pro chat or whatever, and then left it at that and not? And I know, I guess what people are saying is he was upset because he didn't get picked up in 10s or something. And so he just spent time on stream going, let me show you guys something. And he showed the screenshots. But is this something like maybe just kind of keep it among players? Like, I mean, as a player, would it maybe have been better for him?
I mean, I think anything Krim says publicly or like tweets or anything, people are going to hate on. Like, if you win, everybody loves you. Right. If you lose, everybody hates you. It doesn't really matter what it's going to be. Someone's going to find something to hate on Krim for at this point. Right. So I think it's worth the discussion, because now it's something when I'm casting, I'll be paying more attention to stuns and flashes. So like try to like see what the difference is. So I'm not mad at
bring that up, Chance? Because it's a GA. Can you actually bring it up on stream? Are you allowed? Are you guys allowed to talk about gentlemen?
If they're using it, I can talk about what's going on the map. It's part of the strategy.
Okay.
I don't have to sit there and explain why they're not running 5 smokes and search and destroy, but I can say why they are using the 1 or 2 smokes that they have, plus like the flashes, all that. So there's like little workarounds, but I don't know. It's not a great look to call out another team for doing something that seems that small. But also, I think in most of these pro players' minds, these are very small things that could have massive impacts on the map. Like, again, he wasn't saying it doesn't make a difference for the map. He was saying because on one map it's a benefit, on one map it's like a detriment, that it's like a wash effectively. But it might very well be the case that you give one like slightly worse hardpoint team, let them have that extra stun on a Z or cave, boom, now they're beating the slightly better team 80% of the time or something. Like I just don't know the level of depth of the game that these guys do. So it might be a big deal, but in the series, it was a wash. So everybody's willing to say, oh, mistakes happen, and then you just move on.
Yeah, whatever. Move on with it, right? It happened. It is what it is.
The only thing it does speak to that I agree with for the few people that have said it is it's got to be tough, when you're a pro player and you got to remember all these gentlemen's agreements and stuff you can't use, but the game lets you use it and load in with it. Like that has to be slightly, and I know these guys are professionals, but there's no, like, I mean, we can't liken it. I was going to say like basketball or something, but it's almost like if it was like, hey, don't shoot from the free throw line. We've agreed that we're not going to do that, and you have to remember in game, like in the middle, you cross somebody up and you step forward and you got to look down and make sure you're not shooting.
I mean, in my mind, that's like the rules, though. That's what I saw someone on the subreddit explain it this way, and I actually kind of liked it of like,
oh, yeah, go ahead.
You can't pull on a guy's jersey or like throw a hand in his face when he's shooting a free throw. There's an agreement, which is the rules of like, you don't do certain things that like break the game. Like, it's not complicated in my mind why certain things are G8 of like why you can't have 5 smokes.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it makes the game way too complicated, and sometimes thermals don't work through the smoke, and sometimes when it does work through the smoke, then cold-blooded doesn't. So they have a lot that they have to deal with, and when the game changes like on a week-to-week basis, you want to try to keep it as like similar as possible, because you don't want a random gun to come into the meta a couple days before an event, and then some players have figured it out, some haven't. Now they have like a massive advantage. So I understand where they're coming from. I don't think it's too complicated to deal with. I just think there are moments when you're creating 10 classes in a 5-minute span. Sometimes you just flash instead of a stun. Like,
yeah, right.
Yeah. Now, hardline, though, don't put a hardline on. That one's not complicated. If you get forfeited for it, you make sure. The coach should sit in the background and like have that like mental check sort of thing.
I think I heard goalie's voice when you said that. He commented. But very good of them to name their series on YouTube Hardline. I think that's classic.
That's pretty good.
No pun intended on the classic part. But I think that anyway, we'll move on. All right, we're gonna get into predictions, guys, when we come back from a short break, and we're gonna talk about Group A and Group B, final bracket, who we see coming out, and then who faces off in the grand final. I think if any of us have any different than the two teams that 90% of people have out there, you guys will riot, but we'll see what happens. We're going to talk about those predictions and who's in a must-win situation and things like that. And then we're going to take some questions from the chat, so keep typing them. I've been writing them down. If you guys have been asking, I saw some questions for Chance that I got down, and we'll see you guys on the other side.
I've been there for that long, but like, you know,
I was like, Lottie, let him go. Like, don't ask him another question. And she kept asking questions, and I was like, let him go. All right, hey guys, we were having fun conversation about the GOAT 3 times. So, all right, we're gonna go into our predictions, guys, and basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk through Group A. Who do you see? And you can kind of start with what 2 teams do you see coming out of the group? And then you can say what path they're going to take to get there, rather than going match by match. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay. And we'll start with Group A, which is London, Florida, Atlanta, and OGLA. And I will start with. Does either of you want to start?
Doesn't matter to me.
London and Atlanta will make it out.
Okay.
Is that the first part you wanted? Just the 2 teams?
London and Atlanta will make it out?
Yeah.
Okay. That's the same 2 I actually have. Who did you have making it out, Icon?
I also have those same 2, but one of the hardest matches for me to pick is that losers final between OGLA and London. That one, I really feel like that one could go best of 5. It wouldn't surprise me if it went map 5, round 11. But I feel like most of these matches are pretty clear cut, except for whoever makes it out of that losers bracket.
So you have OGLA beating Florida.
Yes. Yep.
In that first losers round.
Yeah.
Is that the same thing you have, Chance, or do you see OGLA not winning a match?
I think. I don't know. If I was forced to pick, I would probably lean Optic LA, but it's just. I'm so solidified in my mind that there's 2 teams and then everyone else that the predictions, I'm happy to just kind of call 50-50 and like let play out and not put a massive amount of thought into, because realistically I care about who the best teams are, and after that it's not as important to me.
So I get that. My thoughts though is that, and everybody seems all over the place on this. On Hardpoints, they didn't. On Spitfire, I listen to every podcast every week, and nobody knows exactly, which is strange right now because I'm sure it's on the Call of Duty League website, how many teams are going to champs. But I thought it was 8 from the league, and there's only 4 that are not going. I thought it was like top 6 get to go, and then there's 2 wildcard spots.
It's the top 4 get to go, and then there's 2 wildcard spots. But I think where the 6 versus 8 comes from is people are saying of like the 2 wildcard spots, 4 teams will go to champs, then they'll have the wildcard battle to like find those 2 teams, and then it's now those 6 teams. So it's actually 8 teams going, but only 6 teams competing in the final bracket. But I don't know if the wildcard thing is happening at champs or what the deal is, but I think that's what makes the most sense. So I think it's 8 teams going to champs, but the final bracket only has 6 or something. Don't trust me on this. I might be wrong as well. I'm also confused, but I think that's what it is.
We can at least probably predict 3 of those top 4 teams based, like right now, we could all predict, okay, goalie's giving us an answer in the chat. We can probably predict 3 of those top 4 teams, like in Dallas, Atlanta, and Chicago. just based on the way the league's playing out right now and the way things look. The only reason I say that these other matches matter, like if you're OGLA and you don't win a match this weekend, you have no points. And we're going into the third tournament of the year after this one, and you have no points at all, and you've played 3 times, or I guess you would have played twice, which is unfortunate because you know they missed the last event. But I think they're in a must-win situation. I don't know if you guys feel the same, but I think they have to at least get 10 points out of this tournament, and they need to fight hard for more. I think the points are gonna matter when it comes to champs time, and you don't want to be anywhere outside of top 6, in my opinion. I know that the way you said it happens is that, you know, like the 4th or the 5th team through the 8th team have to play each other to see who's going to go. But I don't think you want to be outside of top 6 getting near champs. Do you guys think OGLA is in a must-win situation?
So me personally, I think the only team that's really in a must-win would be Toronto. Because if Toronto doesn't win, they're basically solidifying themselves in one of those bottom spots for me personally. I know that it's really early, but not getting wins over in London, and then if they don't get wins here, that's a lot of points that they're missing out on. Since the top 8 teams go, I'm not really sure that. So I know you just mentioned like OGLA, but I really feel like Paris and London and Minnesota and Florida and OGLA, I feel like they're all in that middle bunch. I just feel like they're all going to make it. So if you're thinking about it, those top 3 teams, so Atlanta, Dallas, Chicago, those top 3 are going to make it. So whoever gets that 4th spot, whether it's Paris or London or whoever, then there's the 4 after that. And I just feel like for me personally, there's a few teams that are down there at the bottom. So in terms of must win and not really being able to fight themselves up, to me, it's just Toronto, because I feel like Minnesota is going to be there. I feel like Florida might be like in that 7 or 8 spot. And whether it really matters right now anyways, I mean, there's so much of the schedule in front of us. There's so much of the season in front of us. But for me, if I was Toronto, I really wouldn't want to go 0 for 2 again at this tournament and then just be down at the bottom of the standings there.
I guess I agree with you. The reason I put OGLA in a must win is because in the same way that I put New York in a must win, and I'm happy they got some points in London. I think teams like that are still trying to find their form, so to speak, and they're playing against teams in the first round of these events that have already found their form. So they're kind of in a bad situation. You know, until they get a good bracket, and we could probably look on the CDL website and find it, but until they get a good bracket, if I'm OGLA and I have Dashy and I have TJ and I have Slasher and I have Kenny and I need my team to stay motivated, if I don't get any points at this event, I am absolutely thinking of a change either before or after the LA event, because I'm not going into my homestead like with the potential of having similar results. I guess that's just kind of my mindset. So when I see that group A in that first bracket, I have London beating OGLA, but I have OGLA beating Florida, because I think they have to. I think OGLA, I mean, you guys are probably going to disagree, but I think they'll take a map or 2 off of Atlanta because they're going to be trying that hard. I think they're going to be that prepared. I hope Pac-Man is doing everything in his power to prepare them for this event. I mean, that's just where I am, I guess. And so you guys both seem to have the same path happening, and we've got ATL and London coming out of that group. Okay, so let's look at Group B real quick. And so in Group B, Chance, who do you have coming out?
Chicago, Paris.
Okay, what about you, IKON?
Same, Chicago, Paris. It's the same thing. So it was the same scenario that I came up with Group A, is that losers final between London and OGLA. That one's hard for me. I don't know. I picked London, but that one's hard for me. Same thing here. That losers final for me here is Paris and Minnesota. And I think Paris is going to win, but I think that's a tough one. It wouldn't shock me if Minnesota came out of that.
So you guys are going to probably think I'm wrong, but I'm going to tell you my crazy bracket for Group B is that I actually, well, I guess it's not crazy. I have Chicago beating Toronto. I have Paris beating Minnesota, and then I have Minnesota beating Toronto, and then I also have Minnesota beating Paris. I think Minnesota has a real opportunity right now to try to sneakily find themselves in top four. And everybody talked about them as being that fourth team preseason. The pros, coaches, everyone was talking about them being top four. The only doubt I have is because they should have, and almost, I won't say should have, they almost lost to the LA Gorillas if it wasn't for that violation Chance so eloquently talked about earlier. And so if I'm Minnesota, that top four is a really important placing. And so I have them actually beating Paris. I've seen the great potential of Paris, but I also think that Paris was under-scouted. I don't think teams prepared to play Paris for Minnesota or London, and that's why they've been doing what they've been doing. I mean, literally, the Huntsmen were like, well, we didn't know what they were going to do, you know. So, yeah, they fried us in the hard points, you know, because they were able to take the Huntsmen off of their own game, and they had to play defensive in hardpoint, which they're not used to. But when it came to the other game types, they stomped them, and so. I mean, I believe it was 6-0 in the game 5. And so I think teams are going to prepare for Paris. And if I'm Minnesota, that's a team I'm preparing to have to beat. Like you said, Icon, I'm looking realistically. I mean, if you're realistic in these groups and you know you're going to face off against Chicago, you're going to prepare for them. But I would make sure my team prepared even more for the team I might have to play after Chicago potentially beats us. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, I hope hopefully that makes sense. Since there is a losers bracket, it's like in the NBA. If I was the 8th ranked team playing the number 1 team, I'd be like, okay, the Lakers are going to beat us, or you know, Milwaukee's going to beat us. Who are we going to play after that? And let's make sure we're over prepared, and then maybe we can beat the Lakers or Milwaukee when we get back to the Eastern Conference or Western Conference Finals. So that's who I have. Okay, so you guys both have Chicago and Minnesota, and it sounds like you have very similar brackets. Or Chicago and Paris, sorry. And it sounds like you have very similar brackets. So I'm guessing that all of us have ATL and Chicago making it, winning their matches, their semifinals matches.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. And the most amazing question. Who wins that matchup?
If I no, I don't know, this one, I feel like we've been waiting so long for this buildup, and it wouldn't shock me if it's a hot 3-0 from Atlanta. If I had to guess, that's what I would go with. I just feel like when it comes down to being on land, I just think that they're better. The only thing that gives me a little bit of hesitation there is they have, and I know that we've played a lot of matches so far, but in my mind, they have one of the worst losses that I've seen in the CDL so far. When they lost that Dom to Subliners on Hackney Yard, that was one of the worst performances that I've seen out of them. I mean, they got completely blown out. So had they not lost that map, I would definitely say that this will be a quick 3-0. I don't know. That's just how I feel. I do think Atlanta's going to win. It would be nice if it would go map 5. I don't know if it will. I don't know if Chicago can match the speed from the SMGs that Atlanta puts forward. But if I had to call it, I would call it an Atlanta 3-0. I think it's going to be pretty quick.
It's amazing that you say that, because, and I kind of mentioned it a couple times, but also said, I kind of alluded to it on Twitter. It's like I said this whole thing about, in my opinion, Atlanta needed to 6-0 in Minnesota. And the reason is perception, is exactly what you just said. And regardless of how much people say it's all on the sticks and you live and die on the sticks, and on any given day, whatever team is better is going to win, that's very true. Sometimes going into a match, what makes one team better than the other is their mindset and their perception. And like I said, I think one of the best things for Chicago was getting smacked around by Dallas in the preseason. It was good for that team. They grinded probably more than they would have grinded. They studied VODs maybe even more than they would have studied VODs. They even studied Dallas's VODs probably more than they would have if they would have been the clear better team. And you said it, Icon, in our last podcast. You were talking about the difference between after you win handedly against someone and after you lose to somebody, you respond differently as a pro player. And so The interesting thing now is that right after London, everybody that got on camera, whether it was Envoy, whether it was Scump, I don't know if Formal said anything about it. They all kind of said, we're going to make our S&D even better to get ready for Atlanta. And I like that Scump was like, but they're good in respawns as well, you know, and so we have a lot to prepare for. But now that they won this event and they've kind of done the smack talk with Dallas, what I've been hearing when I'm watching scrims, and I know you watch a lot of scrims, Icon, is there's a little bit of, I can't wait to get on LAN with these guys. You know, some of the stuff they're doing, they're not going to be able to do on LAN. And I'm like, I don't know if this is that team. Dallas has proved there's a difference between them online and them on LAN. I don't think Atlanta, the way Simp responded after that Dom you're talking about, think about what he did after that, like in the hard point. Like, this dude went bananas, and it was disgusting what he was doing in that hard point. And so it's going to be a great matchup for sure. And I have a warning that I haven't tweeted out. It's in my drafts where I tell the other CDL teams, like, if you beat them and they don't make it to the final, I'm going to be so frustrated. Like, I'm going to thumbs down some organizations. Like, you're too good. Stop. I wanted to see these two teams play. So what are your thoughts, Chance, on that matchup between those two teams?
I mean, for one, I'm expecting that to be the finals. I think the rest of the tournament is just for information so we can learn about the other teams, but I would be very surprised if that's not the case. And there might be some upsets. I mean, again, there are some scary teams that could pull something off.
Right.
Atlanta, we've only seen 2 series, so like, you never know. We do have to watch it play out, but I'm fully expecting that to be the finals. And I kind of agree with Icon. I don't think it'd be a 3-0 necessarily, but I do lean fairly heavily in favor of Atlanta, like fairly heavy, just to the point where I'm like willing to say that I'm expecting them to win. But maybe like a 60-40. I think they're just a little bit stronger in the hard point, and I'm definitely expecting them to be stronger in search. And I think if you have at least a small edge in 4 out of the 5 potential maps, like, it's just too much. I'm not worried about them faltering at all against like the LAN juggernauts that is Chicago, against like the T2, like the names and all that. Like, it's 2 world champs on Atlanta. It's like some freaking natures. Like, until they get beat, I still like, they've been my team since like the start of order. That roster is insane. I don't know how the league allowed them to like get formed together. Like, it's that type of thing where like they seem that good. And if there is a team to beat them, Chicago is obviously it, because that is 5 heavy hitters across the board without a doubt. But I don't have nearly enough faith in Chicago's search and destroy. Like, as good as they looked from London compared to like the first event, I just don't see Scump going 13-3 against Sympatheezy, selling like it just across the board. They're freaky in search and destroy. They're still going to be strong in respawn. So until I see them get beat, I'm going to say that like they're that team. They're that team in my mind.
So I also have them winning. And for a lot of reasons, but one of them is I think that the youth of that team, it provides this kind of delusional confidence that Aches used to talk about all the time, that he somehow kept, no matter how old Aches gets, he always has delusional confidence. I don't know how much confidence he has in his team right now, just to be honest. I haven't watched the newest episode of Hardline. I know it came out, I think, today, but I haven't watched it yet. But that delusional confidence is going to causes those guys to challenge gunfights that you might not challenge, that other people might not challenge. But I think if you put it up and go across the board with 1v1s, one of the things that Crim6 admitted when he talked about the whole stun thing is he said Envoy was the number one reason that Chicago won against them. Like, he's almost like as annoying as Crim used to say apathy was on the map. Like, he just didn't know where this guy was going to be, and he was just all over the place, and he moved so quick. That Atlanta team, like you says, has like 4 or 5 people doing that same thing, where they're very unpredictable. They make very quick decisions, and they trust each other in the same way that the Chicago team has proved they trust each other. And it's gonna be interesting. I wish somehow it could, like, I don't know, be 2 best of 5s or something. It's sad that we're going to see them play each other And then I think
or that we won't see them play each other. That would be the worst part.
oh
Yeah.
my gosh,
Chance,
dude.
Chance,
Just
let
it,
me-
just it.
If that happens,
Chance, let me ask you. I got two questions for you because I can kind of see. I'm glad that you hinted towards that because I can kind of see this. Let's look at that one semifinal matchup. Let's look at Chicago and London. What are the chances? Give me a percentage. What's the percentage in your mind that London beats Chicago?
I'd give that 70-30 to Chicago. So like 30%
Okay.
chance London pulls off the win.
I
Like
agree.
Chicago definitely has the advantage. Chicago definitely should win it, but it's by no means a guarantee. Like same thing, I expect Atlanta to beat Chicago if the matchup, but that's like 60-40. Like it's still very close.
Yeah,
That's still that
one's
juggernaut matchup. Like every player on Chicago can take over a game at any given moment and can just
Yep.
beat whoever it is you put in front of them. It's just over the course of time, 60-40. So anyway, sorry.
No, so I agree. I think a lot would have to go London's way. Wuskins would have to pop off and search and destroy. I think a lot would have to go London's way in order for them to overtake in that series. Now, what do you think the percentages are that Paris beats Atlanta? Because me personally, I think that's a little bit higher. I think that Paris has a little bit of a better chance of beating Atlanta than London does of beating Chicago.
I'll retroactively update. I would go 75-25 Chicago versus London because it's like clear cut better team. For Paris Atlanta, I would probably say like 90-10 to Atlanta.
Wow. Okay.
I think they'll just smack them around. Like Paris looked great. They did a lot of great things. I'm sorry. I just don't think the skill on the team is there at this point. I think Paris will get handled by them. I
So you
think that the interesting one, I think, is Optic. This is something like Slasher might have gotten in my head a little bit, but he was saying I could fully see
100%.
us coming out and beating Atlanta and then losing to Florida, whoever it is next, and like not making out of groups after beating
that is
Atlanta.
so possible.
Because I think there's a certain degree of talent that can make up for not being well orchestrated as a team. Optic has all the talent in the world. You just, again, it's they have players that could take over map at any given time sort of thing and just kind of get you that win. But even still, I would still 80-20 to Atlanta in that. I think Atlanta has, or let me look at the group before I say something stupid. I think Atlanta against Optic has a little bit easier. Atlanta versus London would be the 75-25. And then Chicago versus Paris is who's going to play. So for that, I would say, yeah, Chicago should just beat them.
What
So
about Minnesota, Chicago?
Wow.
The Chicago should just beat
I'm a
them
little
too. I mean, again, it's that like the Minnesota Chicago is probably like an 80-20. Both of those are probably like 80-20. Like
Okay.
they're still like Minnesota and Paris are both like really good teams, but I think they get matched out on talent. And I think Chicago is like maybe not as much on Paris. Maybe that's closer to 50-50, but I think Chicago is like a better team as well. Like not talent wise, but like how they play on the map, teamwork, all that jazz.
So even after we saw what Paris could potentially do against Chicago in like that semifinal matchup that they had at London, even after that, you still think you have, if you were to go percentage wise, you think that Optic has a better chance of beating Atlanta than Paris does.
I don't think we see another series where Paris plays against Chicago and Paris wins both the hard points. That still
Agreed.
blows my mind that was the case. I don't think that'll happen again.
That's what,
And
dude, they
so
scare
Paris
me.
will have to take like the searches. Like again, Paris is a very well put together team. They know the game as well as anybody else at this point. I just think against the Chicago's and Atlanta's, it's Chicago and Atlanta also both know the game just as well and have more talent to make up for it.
Paris hates that any of us
Interesting.
talk like this, which is unfortunate. But
I've got faith in you,
again,
Paris.
well, I'm saying Paris is one of the 12 best teams. They're probably one of the 8 best teams in all of Call of Duty. But Chicago has come out in a dominant fashion. They've shown, and it's interesting how this league has worked out because Chicago has been able to show that. Like they didn't have to play, they have not had to play this team that we're talking about right now. Dallas, the one of the main reasons we're looking at Dallas the way we are is because of who they played in Minnesota. Period. If it was switched and Dallas played OGLA and then Chicago played Atlanta, and let's say Chicago left 1-1 and Dallas left 1-1, we wouldn't be having this same conversation. It would be different because the map count between the two of them would be different. Dallas's confidence would be different. Alien Shotzi would probably be playing different with more confidence. Like, who knows what conversation we'd be having if it wouldn't have been set up the way it was to have all these show matches and marquee matchups in Minnesota. And it changed the conversation completely. And I'm kind of happy for this event because it's going to change the conversation again. I'm and I guess I don't have it. And we're about to go to questions from chat, guys. I've been writing down your questions. Ask a couple more if you want. But I guess I want to start by asking you guys this. In your power rankings, and I'm putting quotes around that because I know it's difficult. Who do you have in order? Who do you have in the top three? And then who are your bottom three? And I'll start with Chance.
Top three in order: Atlanta, Chicago, then probably Dallas. But also for like a tier system, Atlanta, Chicago are next to each other. A tier below them is Dallas, and then after that, I think a new tier comes in where London, Subliners, Paris, all those other
Florida,
like
Minnesota,
middle of the pack teams sort of like pop up. Bottom three would be, what is it? The Gorillas, Optic LA, probably. And you see like the full list of teams, and then probably Toronto.
Okay.
That's what instinct says. I don't know if I'm forgetting anybody, but that seems accurate. But I would be concerned about like maybe a Florida slipping into the bottom three at some point. Like so just to trail back to a point you were making earlier, Kingdom, of how important it is to like get a good start at the early year to actually earn some points. We will see one of two things, to where either a team is going to overperform at the start of the year, get a bunch of points, fall into the bottom four, but then still end up in the top 8 range, even if they're the worst team in the league by the end of the year because of the points they stacked up early. Or we'll have a team, maybe like an Optic would be a good example of, who eventually would be really good, but because of how like terrible of a start they had right at the beginning, it's going to be too close of an uphill climb where they'll end up in a wild card spot and maybe don't make it to the top 4. Like, one of those two things will happen.
Or
like someone will get either shot in the foot, or they will do so well at the start that even if they fall off, they get that guaranteed cash at the end of the year from having like a good enough seed. One of those is going to happen, like if not both. Just to trail back a little bit.
There's 3 or 4 teams that there's going to be 2 bubbles. There's going to be a top bubble for the top 4, and then there's going to be a bottom bubble for who's going to be in the bottom 4. And there's a couple of teams like a New York, like a Seattle, like a Florida, even maybe a Minnesota. We'll see how it plays out. OGLA maybe, that are going to be, there's some teams that are clearly going to be in the bottom 4 based on looking at their rosters now and how they're playing. But then there's a couple others that are going to be fighting to keep their points high enough to not get excluded from champs completely. And it's such an interesting league. And one of our questions I'll ask you in a second, Chance, about the way that things have changed. But go ahead, Icon, your top 3 in order, and then your bottom 3.
Top 3. I mean, I feel like it's the same thing that everybody has: Atlanta, Chicago, Dallas. There's a tiny little part of me, there's like a 5% of me that is willing to put Chicago above Atlanta just because they've proved something, and in my book that means something. So the fact that they went to London, they went through all the adversity, they came out on top still after all of that, even after losing the 2 hard points and being close down to the wire in some of those matches in the grand finals against Dallas. So to me, that gives me a little bit more confidence in Chicago just because they've been there and they've proven it. But I don't want to put them there yet, but I'm saying that, there's a little part of me that could see them there. And then the bottom for me, Toronto, I think they're all the way at the bottom. I think this is, if they get 0-2'd here, I think it's a pretty rough road for them moving forward. And then after that, probably, sorry to hurt your feelings, but probably Seattle and LAG. That would probably be my bottom 3. I hope that Seattle figures it out, because I think the CDL could benefit from those names, having success. I'd want to see them have success, but that would be my bottom 3, those 3.
Yeah, Octane they'll keep trying to figure things out there. And if you're Seattle, because there's no draft or anything, so if you're Seattle, you're not going to like trade off Octane and lose on purpose so that you can get a better player next year. Like, this isn't that kind of a league. So I don't know what happens with him. I don't know how long he stays. I don't know. Enable was saying when it comes to his switch, he kind of has the ability to choose if he wants to go where they try to trade him or not. I would say for me, I do have Chicago above Atlanta only because they've proven themselves, and the way this league works after this weekend, it'll be very clear. But I do think there's a potential chance. The words you said have come out of my mouth a whole bunch of times. If any team can beat Atlanta, it's Chicago. And if Chicago gets to the grand final versus Atlanta, they are the team that could beat them. It would have to be a slugfest, and they'd have to play at their best, because it's a home. They're the home team this weekend as well. Like, Atlanta is getting to prove themselves at home, and much like Minnesota got to do, which was cool, and so I think that I have Chicago, Atlanta, then Dallas. I honestly think that it's clear. I do not see Dallas and Chicago in the same playing field. And by putting Chicago over Atlanta, I'm basically also saying that they're not in the same stratosphere right now, tier-wise, like you talked about, Chance. Bottom three, unfortunately, I have the Gorillas, Toronto, and then right now it's hard for me not to put Seattle there, even though OGLA has no points yet. There's just too much on that team. There's too much on that OGLA roster. They're going to be that team that is going to pick up points wherever they can. They're going to almost get like scrap points throughout the year, and they're probably going to get enough to be top 8 and to be in wild card contention. New York, I'm telling you, New York, you better be one of those teams that gets in wild card contention. That's a team that I would be sad if for some reason they didn't make champs. Like, I would honestly be sad for Attach and Zuma, and like, I like those guys. I personally want them to be in champs, and if Damon misses another champs, I'm going to be sad as well. So we'll see what happens with rosters and things like that, but that's a I'm happy you guys see that. All right, I'm going to be watching the chat, guys, for questions from chat. So I'm going to start with this question for you guys. With Enable and the Surge, are the Surge better with the substitute, with the change? And Enable talked about the roster trade rules. He's actually been very open about it, and he's been talking about it and saying that he's had teams hit him up already. People are saying, wow, wouldn't it be nice if he went to OGLA for cap? But if you are Seattle, like, is there a reason you would want JCap? Maybe for the salary opening up. I don't know who's getting paid more. I don't know how that works out, but it sounds like Enable is able to admit or able to decide, I don't want to go there, if they try to trade him somewhere that he doesn't want to go. So I'll kind of ask you guys, here's the two questions. Number one, are the Surge better putting him on the bench? And if Enable was going to go to a different team, where do you think he would benefit from, and where a team would benefit from getting him as well? And either one of you guys can start.
I'll take like the first question at least, since I have like more well thought out opinions on that. I don't know if Seattle will get better like right at this next event, or like they're not even going to be at Atlanta, but whatever their like very first event they have, if it's LA after that, I don't know if they'll overperform where they were, but I think long term it's a better decision because you have a couple options. Either Panda helps you be better at like search and destroy, and he fills in well. You have a bump in that, even if the respawn takes a little bit of a hit, that pays off dividends because now your search is going to be good. Or if Enable gets back to the grind and now he's like, hey, this is my wake up call. I'm kind of glad this happened. Now I see where I'm at. He grinds again, starts grinding S&D, comes back to the team, revitalized, ready to go. Now they hit the form they were expected to hit at the start of the year, or they can trade Enable and they find like a new piece for him that fits better with Seattle. Like, I think the move does enough to wake up the team just a little bit, to wake up Enable a little bit, that you have a couple different pathways, maybe like 3 different options, all of which have potential positive outcomes. So I think overall, this is something that should help the Seattle team. I think it was a good decision, maybe like a little bit early. Maybe we could have seen how it worked, but if he's even saying out loud to himself, it's a wake-up call, I think it's a positive thing. So even if it doesn't pay off immediately, I think long-term it was a smart decision.
Okay. And to your point, Enable has admitted, I was not grinding like I should have been grinding. He said that openly, and this was a wake-up call for him. He getting benched this early in the season. He's also said he's not making a decision on what happens, if he's going to move or if he's going to ask to be moved until after the LA event. Go ahead, IKON.
Yeah, I'm not in touch with like, you know, the players' thoughts and actions as much as you guys might be. If I'm just looking at it purely from a statistical standpoint,
yeah,
I mean, he has a 0.8 in respawn and a 0.67 in S&D. So will Seattle get better? I think it would be hard pressed for them not to get better. Does that hurt maybe their team chemistry a little bit? I mean, I guess that could potentially happen.
Okay.
But just from the standpoint of, does Seattle get better? I don't see how they couldn't. And I mean, every once in a while, players need a wake up call like this. I mean, it is what it is. If you're not performing, you're not putting in the time, and you're not doing what you're supposed to do, then here you go. Take a step back, reevaluate where you're at, and then hit it harder when we call you back up.
Yeah. All right.
Actually,
Chance.
I had this written down somewhere,
Chance.
just like double back of, like, it was like when you built the Seattle team, it should be expected that they weren't going to be good at search. And just to pick on Enable a little bit, he has 2 events of the past, what is this, 9 events I think I wrote down of like in a row, like concurrently back through like World War II, where he had a positive KD in search. His average over the entire time is around like a 0.8. Like, yes, he is the bomb player and all of that, but you pick him up on your team. At this point, you're just expecting he's not going to be the best search player. So you have to have guys like, I don't know, Kenny for 100 Thieves, like around him, or like a Priesty even, that are going to be so much better that it's fine. And you can have strategies to work around with it. But I don't think Seattle did that with their team. So I think this was expected. And if that happens, that means every one of those guys needs to be grinding search and destroy like constantly from the get-go, which I think ties into the wake-up call of like it just didn't happen. And if that just means anything, like I was expecting Enable to get destroyed.
Enable has been very successful in Call of Duty. He's gotten second at some of the largest tournaments in our esport. He's won tournaments. He played on some very great rosters with great people. Again, though, and just to put it out there before we move to the next question, Seattle is one of the teams that at a point in the preseason had to get what they could get based on what Hector wanted, what Hastro wanted, and what Optic was unwilling to give up. Like, there's some things that could have happened and shaken up to where maybe the talent would have been a little more spread throughout the league, but things didn't happen. And you know, Hex has kind of alluded to that, but he can't reveal the facts, but he's kind of alluded to the fact. And if you follow the storylines, then it's like, okay, there's a chance that Arcides and Envoy were not going to play for the team that they're playing for. And my thoughts are maybe they were going to play in Seattle, where Arcides is from, all this kind of stuff. Like, that's what, when I'm looking at the storylines, that's kind of my thought process. And it just didn't turn out that way. And Seattle kind of was like, okay, well, let's put these guys together and these storied people. And unfortunately, you know, I mean, big ups to Enable for being for being man enough and integrous enough to admit. I mean, I don't want to say he wasn't doing his job, but part of their job is to grind and is to play the game and get better every day. And so for him to admit that, that's awesome. People in the chat are saying Killa or Parasite to Seattle. I feel bad for Parasite, man. I think he's always been a better player than his attitude, I guess, and his persona has demonstrated, in my opinion. And so he's wound up in some positions that he didn't want to be in. All right, Chance, this question is directly for you. Somewhere earlier in the chat, do you enjoy playing Modern Warfare, like actually playing it yourself?
Pubs, Gunfight I like, but pubs I just stopped playing after the first like week or two or something like that. Now that the CDL playlist came out, I've been grinding that and been having a good time. I definitely have to like swap what game modes I play, but GBs have been good when I'm playing with friends. The CDL playlist is nice. If there was ranked, I'd be streaming and playing that all the time. Like, I enjoy the core game. It's just, you know, like I just don't enjoy it for pubs at all. I enjoy the competitive aspect of it. So CDL playlist is nice, but that's about it.
Okay. And IKON, I know you like it. You were playing it today, but do you play it a lot, or do you spend most of your time watching scrims and watching Call of Duty competitively?
Yeah, I spend a lot of time just watching. I played today just because the news around a potential BR. So if a BR comes out, I don't want to be absolutely terrible. So I played a little bit trying to, touch up my skills so that when a BR comes out, I can hit that full speed. But yeah, I mean, it's okay. I've really grinded some past CODs, and this one doesn't really draw me like some of the other ones have. Now, if there was a league play, that would be a little bit different. But I'm the same as Chance. I mean, it's hard to just hop into like a hard point on, just some random map that's not a CDL map and really go hard and take it seriously. So that's where I'm at.
I think one of the best things about like when we've had legitimate league play in the past has been you had players that were unheard of that are going up against pro players. And I would see like in Scump's stream, he'd be like, who's this guy? Like, and then you'd see them be like, hey, that guy on the other team named this. Watch out for him.
Abizi, World War II. He was the #1 ranked grinder. Now he's a world champion. Crazy what a ranked play system can do, man. Crazy.
Abizi's gonna fry this weekend. We have not seen his potential. We didn't get to see it in Minnesota. He's gonna fry this weekend. He's been talked up as like the best player in the game, like better SMG than Simp, more valuable to it. Like I'm like from pros, he's been talked up as like Abizi's that guy. So we'll see. We'll see. Chance, the change from CWL to CDL format, pros and cons, kind of likes and dislikes. If you can speak to that, I know you work for the CDL.
Like tournament format stuff like that.
Yeah.
I don't know, like as nice as the idea of like open bracket teams getting to play against the pros is, because occasionally, once in a blue moon, it would be amazing to watch that team make a run. 90% of the time, they get smacked around. I'd have to cast it. It sucks because I just knew who was gonna win. So like, I'm not mad that that's not a thing anymore, but I can understand the appeal. Like, I do enjoy open bracket tournaments. I'm glad it's a thing. And I guess CWL last year is like separated, so I guess that's not a true format change. But
Right.
GSL, I kind of like the single. Like, as many times as we had said Chicago versus this team or Atlanta versus this team, they should win 80% of the time. It's still single elimination, or once you get to that final bracket at least. So like, as soon as you're there, anything could happen. Like Paris, if they go to a game 5 again against Chicago, they turn up and search and destroy. Dens takes over, whoever it's going to be, boom, you win, and now you win the championship or get to the finals, whatever it's going to be. So I think the single limb / GSL format, whatever it's called, I think has a lot more potential for exciting moments. So I think I like it. I want to see it play out more, but I'm definitely a fan early on.
Okay.
I think I don't know if there's like more format changes worth like commenting on, but that's the first one that came to mind.
And it does seem to I was listening to Midnight on the Rocker podcast. They were interviewing Alex and talking about the different format, and they were confused when it first came out. But I think it there's a lot more pressure when you make it to that finals bracket. And I mean, we had 2 semifinals, if you think about it, that were way longer. I'm sure for you guys that was tough, like waiting so long in the venue, but that were way longer than expected. Everybody expected, oh, it's going to be, game 5 when Dallas plays Chicago, but Dallas had to reverse sweep London in order to get to the finals. And Chicago had to have an amazing search game, in 6-0 Paris, because they got beat in both hard points. Like that was not expected. So to your point, I agree. Like, it actually creates a scenario where a team that is better, that could get back up into the finals and do the, second best of 5 type deal, that doesn't exist. And so it's going to be interesting the way this plays throughout the year. All right. I got 2 more questions. So I know that a lot of the changes that have taken place with the game modes, I'm guessing, and I'm not saying they directly listen to hard points, but I do know that on hard points, Maven said he's received phone calls based on things they've said on their show. And one of the things they talked about a lot in this last episode was, how can you shorten the time, like so that you guys aren't having these 11-hour days, because these venues have to be booked, and how can you, so that Formal and the whole team is not sitting there for 8 hours waiting to play, and the other team they are gonna play has played 2 matches already. How can you shorten the time? And it looks like the game mode changes are gonna help that, and maybe that might shave a total of an hour off of the day. But are there any other suggestions, Chance, that you might have? And IKON, you can chime in as well. I don't know how much insight you might have to this, because I don't have a lot either. But from being there, Chance, is there any other suggestions that you might make from being present rather than just the viewing experience that might kind of make it a little more concise, so that somehow you guys can get into that kind of 8 to 9 hour mark when it comes to the total broadcast?
I mean, I don't necessarily have suggestions. I just know that most of it is like on the production side of things. Like, you can speed the game up by 30 seconds per round, which like does make a difference. But like, something we did on Saturday at London was like, we didn't have the desk for the first 3 matches. So instead of like having to throw back and forth and having an actual like 5-minute thing in between, we just like cut all that time out. So there's a lot of things in production you can do to speed the game up, but there's also a lot of things that cause like extra delays of like pauses in game because controllers don't work or whatever type of like wiring issue that adds 30 minutes to a series, not because no one's ready, just because like something went wrong. So I think part of it is just production being like a little bit cleaner. There's adjustments that can be made, but it's just, to me, it's like minor tweaks. And then you just hope mistakes don't happen and everybody's controller works, and that'll speed it up. But nothing, I don't have anything in mind that like severely like helps out now.
Yeah, I don't know. I just analyze what I see, so I have no idea. But after your reply there, Chance, did you feel like, so we talked about this a little bit in the last podcast, and I was just curious, did you feel like there was more on your shoulders? Like you guys had to fill more dead time because it wasn't thrown back to the to the death so much?
I mean, look, we've had events in Call of Duty like UMG South Carolina where we're filling for 4 hours straight.
No one wants to remember this.
I know. So I think there was one series where me and Ben, while we were casting, kind of noticed of like, this is longer fill than we're used to, an extra couple minutes, but it's not. It's just what we do. We just have to talk about COD when that's the case. So it's not like a massive undertaking, no.
Okay. What was this last question? Who do you guys think needs to show up the most this weekend? And you can say individual player or team.
I mean, team, I would say Chicago. That's like my instinct for who needs to show up.
Who on Players Chicago would you say needs to show up the most? Or would you say player, you would pick a different team maybe?
I would just say they need to either outright get the win against Atlanta in the finals, or they just need to like look good while doing it. Like, I don't like those players aren't going to doubt themselves at all, but I think that's the one thing I want to see, where if I'm expecting Atlanta to be the better team, I think Chicago needs to show up again, because they've been proving people wrong for the first 2 events now, and just get that out of the way and be done with like the next storyline that we have of like, Chicago are great, but they're not better than Dallas. Turns out that's not true. Chicago are great, not better Atlanta. Get it out of the way. So I just think they're still the team. It's mainly because they have the biggest fan base with the most pressure on their back, just to get the win and get out of the way. So in my mind, that's who needs to like show up as a team, at least. Players, just a different question. Or, I mean, you could go the opposite route and just pick Optic or Toronto or any of the teams that we're not expecting to be good at all. Just be like, hey guys, like poke them, just like do something. Like, please do something, make it interesting. Like, we don't have expectations, but.
Well, let's think about it. And somebody just said it in the chat. What if, Optic does beat Atlanta? Now, Atlanta still can win the event, of course. But what that means is that Chicago and Atlanta would now play in the semifinals rather than the finals. And so then one of those teams is going home with 20 points and the other one's going home with 50. Like, it makes a huge difference if one of those teams, if they have to play each other in the semifinals, basically, because one of them is going to leave with way less points than the other one. And honestly, for bragging rights, if I'm one of the top 2 or 3 teams, I want it to be clear where I'm at, and so if I'm Chicago, 30 points is the minimum I'm getting at this event. But I'm going for the 50. I want to win, of course. Not winning is, you ask any pro player, even on the worst team in the league, they're going to say, no, we want to win the whole thing. We're not trying to just get some points. Like, that's not a strategy for a team. We want to win the entire thing. And if somebody comes out hot and on that day they win and Atlanta or Chicago goes to the losers bracket, like you were talking about those percentages earlier, Icon, we could see a very interesting tournament. And to be honest, as a viewer, I'd love it to be interesting. I just need those 2 teams to meet. It has to happen. And if it doesn't, I'm going to be very sad. Icon, who would you say needs to show up? Team and player?
I don't know so much about player. I could look into it a little more. But for me, for team, I just feel like it's kind of those same teams that are in the must-win situation. I know Chance kind of went back on that just a second there towards the end. But for me, Minnesota, Florida, OGLA, I kind of feel like they're in that middle group, but if they don't show up, then they're kind of missing an opportunity to solidify themselves there. Like Atlanta, Chicago, London, Paris, I feel like we know where those 4 teams are. And I think those next few teams that are there, Minnesota, Florida, OGLA, I'd like to see them show me something to prove that they belong kind of in that middle bunch there.
So I'm going to say what I said earlier is that OGLA needs to show up. And I'm going to say on that team, the JCap needs to show up. I think there is honest consideration of Enable going to that team maybe or something. I don't know, some kind of trade, some kind of changes. And I feel bad for JCap because anytime he's on a losing team, everybody's like, it's his fault. They just immediately look at him. And sometimes maybe he's the lowest performer and things like that. But I remember the old in the chat watching Drop JCap, just like the drop nade shot. And it's like, whoever is just not doing well, immediately people just are like, go crazy and like drop them. And I honestly think OGLA has an opportunity to be like, we're not these other teams that are going to struggle to get a win this year. We can beat some of these bigger teams. I agree with Chance and what you said earlier. Chicago and Atlanta are not going to beat everyone the whole year. They're going to take some losses, and why not be the team that beats them? You know, why not be the team that pulls off that upset? And even if you're OGLA and you beat Atlanta and then you go into the bracket stage and you lose to Chicago or lose to whoever comes out from the other side, you lose to London or whoever, you proved something and you walk away with 20 points and you're in a much better position than you were before you came to this event. So that's who I would say. All right, last question.
Just to touch on the JCap thing, if I may. I fully expect JCap is going to drop a 0.8 something at the event, and that's not a slight. That's what he should be doing. Like when you have Dashy and TJ and Slasher, like when that is your team, you should not have a positive KD unless your team is winning every single map sort of thing. He should be the guy that has like a KD that's not great, but he needs to be like the envoy kind of player, like the hide and seek champion of making the smart plays, of sneaking your way through whatever hill to lock down and block spawns. Like, JCap doesn't need to put up numbers for me to be like JCap like showed up and had a good event. I do agree he's a player that needs to have a good event. He needs to be like that smart player though. He needs to be the guy that's manipulating the map, that's putting his team in smart positions. I don't need to see JCap cracked out of his mind, doing something crazy, slide canceling, whatever it's going to be. Just make the smart plays, put your team in good positions, because like there is a good 0.85 and there is a bad 0.85. I just think the expectation, I think, at this point is for JCap to fall into the latter rather than the former. But I think he's a fully capable player if he's playing like at his best and at his smartest. He can happily drop a 0.85 and get his team a bunch of wins. Like not like a leader for the team or whatever.
Let me ask this question of both of you. So if I'm looking at, because this is something I'm not 100% clear on in this game yet. If I'm looking at a team like Chicago, and let's just use Chicago. Who on Chicago, whose role is JCap mirroring? Or are their teams so different that the roles are even different? Like whose role on the map is JCap mirroring to where he should, and I know he's not gonna have similar stats, but you know what I'm saying? Like what role is he playing? Like, and I guess I'm asking that question because I see someone like Clay, who I did not think was gonna have events where he was the best player on his team, one of the best players at the event. And I like Clay. I think he's a great player, but I thought he was going to be more of a support role, not controlling spawns and controlling the map the way he did in London. So my question is kind of, I don't know if I hope I'm making sense. Like, what role is JCap playing, and where do we see that in the CDL where, he's playing a similar role to someone else, like on Chicago?
I personally, I don't think there's like a good one-to-one comparison. Like I look at the Chicago team and I expect pretty much all five players on that team, basically to know where they should be at all times for the most part. You still need to communicate where like spawns are coming through, but I have faith in most of those guys to be pretty much like on top of the ball. Not the same for like the Optic LA. Like I don't think Dashy is going to be in the right position on the map at any given time. I just think Dashy will gun people from any position he's on the map at any given time. So that's where I think JCap like needs to be the guy to help me to play the envoy role, but not really because Gunless does it. They all do it at different times. But I think it's more important for him to step up for Optic to be that guy, because I think on Chicago more guys will like fill into that slot. So that's why I give that the elevated level of importance for him.
Yeah, I agree. I can't really see a one-to-one matchup, and I get like the envoy role, but the problem is that like Envoy has the ability and the skill to be like league MVP, right? I mean, he has that within him, whereas that's not something that you'd really see from JCap.
Yeah, great player, two-time champion. He's been, of course, on some great and awesome rosters and pulled off wins people didn't expect. But I think, like you said, Chance, people are expecting that he's gonna, because he's on a team full of,
like he should be. He should be having the worst KD on the team, unless someone's underperforming. Like that's not a slight at JCap at all. That's the way things should be for Optic to have success.
So then,
like RCDs has like what below, or not, I don't know if it's below 1 point KD, but RCDs I think has like the worst KD on his team. Like, come on,
his hard point
Alec is disgusting, bro. He's a disgusting player. There's the KD is relevant to the wins the team is getting. A 0.85 on a team that can't win anything is horrible. A 0.85 team or KD on a team that's winning everything is amazing.
That's probably doing your job.
You just have to make it so your team is getting the wins.
Okay. Last question, and well, it was asked in the chat. I'm just gonna answer it. If you guys want to speak to it, you can. I don't think Chance will, but because it's about coworkers of yours. Somebody asked about long-term Rich or bring back Teep. I've been very vocal, and I just really loved what Teep brought. In my opinion, he's kind of like if you put Chance on the desk. Like, to be honest, he knows what he's talking about. He knows the players. And I was very shocked that he knew the game as well as he did. And he could talk about it as well as he could. I mean, I know he's a professional and Maven always talks about it. People don't really know, but Maven knows the game. You know, he understands the game. And people think he doesn't because he's the wow factor, you know. But I was very impressed with Teep in Minnesota. And I'd love to see him back on the desk. I think he calls out things that I don't see. Rich is like putting me on the desk. You know, he's just going to talk about players and talk about, you know, attitude and talk about history and what's happened and how it looks like things are going to play out. And he might quote some stats and, you know, he was entertaining in a way with what he did. But I like having someone on the desk, and maybe that's supposed to be nameless, but I like having someone on the desk that with the level of knowledge that Teep was sharing. I just felt like it was a benefit to the esport. It's like having when I watch some of the CSGO broadcasts, there's like a couple of guys that just kind of talk and chum it up. And then there's that one person on the desk that's just like, you know, I'm like, okay, he's a former pro. Like that dude, he there's something different about this guy. Like, and he knows how to communicate it, because you can't just be a former professional. You have to know how to talk and how to communicate it in a way where people understand. And I thought Teep did a good job of that. So that's my take on it. Whoever that was that asked that question. Molly, thank you for asking that question. It's been a great show. Great chat, great comments. You know, I try to watch the chat as much as I can, but sometimes I go back and watch the broadcast on my phone and just watch the chat because it pulls things out that I might want to talk about in a video. I think, honestly, the storylines that are happening in the CDL right now are really good. I'm very pleased with how this league has started, with the changes that have been made on the fly all the time. And I think about mid-season, we're going to find our stride, and it's going to be predictable how things are going to flow at an event, how the game's going to be played at an event. The weird wrinkle every year with Call of Duty is there's going to be a new Call of Duty. And so we can talk as much as we want about Atlanta's going to be the best team for the next 3 years, or Chicago. But the reality is boots on the ground versus advanced movement, and whether you can slide or not slide, or dolphin dive, or certain streaks, or score streaks, kill streaks, like however games work out, whatever the gentleman's agreements are, they're going to change every single year. And players that were good are going to be not as good, and players that were okay are going to all of a sudden be great. It's just going to happen in some games. There's players that were amazing at Black Ops 4 that are not as good. They're still good players because they have core competency, but they're not as good in this game. And so it'll be interesting to see how it works out. I'm very pleased with what I've seen, and some players have surprised me. So I'm going to give you guys an opportunity if you want to say anything else before we go, before I close the show out.
Just thanks for having me on. Appreciate the time to talk about Call of Duty. Always fun. Always fun. It's been fun, guys. You can find Chance on Twitter. It's on the screen. You can find IKON on Twitter as well. And Chance, you don't make content, right? I mean, if it's like CDL produced, I do, but that's about it.
I think there's been some encouragement to get you to stream again, but you know, we'll see.
Something like that.
Yeah, it may happen in the future. I'm excited for the BR, guys. I'll be playing Modern Warfare probably this weekend, and you'll see it on my stream. And for those of you that have discovered the CDL because you followed me from Call of Duty Mobile, welcome. I hope you guys are learning a lot and you're excited to watch some competitive Call of Duty. Nevertheless, it's your boy Kingdom and Chance and IKON, and we will see you guys next time. Peace out.